Alex Hanser here, and it is my honor to bring you this presentation. Today's date is April 5th in the year 2019. There's a report that just made the news. I want to bring your attention to it. There is a new discovery at Lake Titicaca, and I'm going to show you a glimpse of that report at this time. Now, I find this interesting for a number of different reasons. Take a look at this headline: Offerings to Supernatural Deities Discovered in Lake Titicaca in the Andes. Now, this is, an, this is a region in South America. I'm not an expert on it, but things like quinoa do come from regions like that, Bolivia and Peru. There are many people that make a spiritual pilgrimage down to Peru, David Icke included. I think that there is a connection between certain places on the planet. And so we could be more tapped into a certain level of consciousness based on where we are on the planet. I think since I've relocated here to Colorado, I've been tapping into an element of the ancient past specifically regarding Colorado. And so when I noticed this, let's go back and then I'll show you what else I have prepared here. So we're dealing with the uh, Incan ruins, and there's a couple of different articles here. Rise of religion predates Incas at Lake Titicaca. Let's just read a few words here. An ancient group of people made ritual offerings to supernatural deities near the island of the sun in Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, about 500 years earlier than the Incas, according to an international team of researchers. The team's findings suggest that an organized religion emerged much earlier in the region than previously thought. So this is a new discovery. The time period here, the Tiwanaku people, the Tiwanaku, who developed in Lake Titicaca between 500 and 1100 AD, were the first people to offer items of value to religious deities in the area. Taking a look at cosmosmagazine.com. So here is an image of some of these artifacts. And one of these is described as a hybrid of sorts. That is probably this as well as that. It describes some of the things that were found. The Island of the Sun in Lake Titicaca, Bolivia, is one of the most famous sacred locations associated with the Inca people, but archaeologists have shown that the site was a center for religious worship 1,000 years ago before the great Andean civilization arose. And that is the connection that I'm making with quinoa. Quinoa was instrumental in that civilization, in feeding the population. In a paper published in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, researchers led by archaeologist Christopher Dallaire from the University of Oxford reveal the results of water excavations in the Koa Reef near the island of the Sun. Okay, now I'm just going to pause. Why do I find this of particular significance? Well, I'm going to show you these images here, and this was a close-up of a rock. Okay, so it was a national monument, Native American, Hopi specific to the Hopi, also known as the Anasazi to the Navajo. Okay, so they have this monument, but they have these rocks, and most people don't zoom in and look at the rocks from another angle. And so there's one particular picture online regarding a Native American site that was in high res. I'm going to go ahead and transition this. So these images that are manifesting on this rock, on this national monument in Colorado, seem to be almost Incan specifically. I also mentioned Egyptian. I made a video earlier in the year in which I put some music from Pink Floyd, The Division Bell, which is fairly appropriate. I see serpent symbolism with regards to this image. Okay, and other people may see other things when they look at these images. But is this a natural rock formation? Are these entities frozen in time? The same thing goes by what I'm going to show you in the next array of pictures, which come from Bill Gorman, right? But this is all right here. This is all from the same site. This also looks serpent-like. This looks like a hybrid. And somebody can look at this picture and see this from another different. This looks clearly like some sort of a man with his arms outstretched. I see what appear to be fingers and knuckles, and this can be interpreted a number of different ways. But I clearly see a face there. This looks like a bull, and what's interesting is that the idea of the bull being sacred is relevant in multiple mythologies, from East India to um, other different things that I recall were mentioned in the book, to Southeast Asia, to the Celts. This image here almost appears to be something like an angel or some sort of sculpture piece. So as we look at that, when I came to that awareness or perception that these pictures may be revealing, that these close-ups of another picture may be revealing some detail, um, the question is, where does this come from and what does this remind us of? And one of the images, and I'll go to it as it comes up on the screen, appears to be something somewhat of a dragon head. And that came across as Incan to me. And so the question is there more of an ancient past here in Colorado than what is currently known? Because there are still things that are discovered, still waiting on the image. There was another location by the name of Mesa Verde, which is at another location in Colorado near the Four Corners. By the way, this is the image here. See the image there? It looks dragon-like. That reminds me of Incan. So there's another location, Mesa Verde, where they discovered that it somehow aligned up with the sun. And they weren't aware of this years ago. This is something that they just recently discovered, like I believe 2017. And so, and some of these spots are not too far away. And then you also have Moab in Utah, which overtly looks like an ancient city, an ancient emerald city. So I think that there's something to this. Tom Horn also uh, made a mini documentary about his own theories about the giants in the ancient past, and he focused on some specific locations, specifically Moab in Utah. But when I look at these images from Bill Gorman, this is probably an appropriate time to go to that. Now, these are not in any specific order. There's plenty of images that are left out, but you can look up Bill Gorman and mammoth temples, which is like a massive elephant, which was worshipped for obvious reasons in the ancient past. It's its use in obtaining food, hunting, and other things. But some of these images, some could say it's just the angle in which he took it. There's something very lifelike about some of the things that are depicted here. And I'm only showing a sample. I'm going to leave this up for a few minutes. And some of these things require almost a few minutes per picture, and he has hundreds. But there almost seems to be an element of the ancient past that's being told, if you will, through some of these images. Animism, it's the idea of spirit animating rocks and nature specifically. This is in much of your ancestry, even if you're European. I mean, if you look at even Tolkien and things of that nature, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, and you also look at teachings from the East. There is something to the idea of spirit and rock. And so, taking a look at some of these images, and some of them I zoomed up on. This appears to be a face, by the way. This also appears to be a face, almost like the face of a lion. Some of this stuff looks like it's almost genetic engineering of the fallen gods frozen in time and then hit with a deluge, just to be frank. I know that sounds pretty radical, but this has been an idea that's been growing on me for a while. This appears to be potentially two entities or faces kissing. This appears to almost be something in a state of meditation, or it can be viewed from another angle. Other images, which we're about to get to, this looks like a face. There is an image that is coming up, and that's zooming out. There's an image that looks like there's some chariots of the god mating with some sort of a female form of life of the earth plane, to put it frank. And that is coming up. This also looks like a face. And then some of the faces that are depicted seem to almost be faces where it's just one eye. This is what appears to be a mating with a woman. And you can hit pause on that. This appears to be a number of entities with their backs turned, like almost in shame, like they were some form of creation that was turned away. What I'm getting at is this also appears to be a face with one eye. And so when I started looking at this, other dots were connecting within me. This appears to be like a snake head with something coming out of the mouth on the left here. There seems to be an ancient world here that's hidden in plain sight. Not just here in this part of Colorado, but elsewhere. So what really is going on underneath Denver? Because then I started thinking a little bit deeper. What about uh, a potential entry to the inner workings of the earth from places like that, and perhaps elsewhere? Some of these also almost seem to have alien faces to them. Then if you look at some of the locations in New Mexico, Chaco Canyon and elsewhere, they almost look like an ancient alien world frozen in time. This appears to be a face here, and so there seems to be a lifelike nature to some of these faces. I'm almost thinking it's something out of Star Wars, something very machine-like from what we're seeing here on the right, like something that you would see from The Empire Strikes Back, believe it or not. This Bill Gorman believes could be Thoth. Uh, and so he also has this where it's depicting from Anubis to Moses to Thoth to Inky there on the left, Anubis here, various photographs that mirror elements of the ancient world, ancient mythologies, Zechariah Sitchin, the Garden of Eden, Genesis. I think there's something to this. It's there's something to this, not just here in Colorado, but elsewhere. And I think that I've always thought there's been an overlap, back to this mammoth, an overlap between ancient sites and potentially government operations deep underground. Now, what do you think has been going on in the East in Tibet? Tibet has its own interesting stories. So we look at Tibet, Colorado, right? The mountain range in Bolivia, down south, new discoveries, also new discoveries in Egypt, right? And there may be something political to that, the timing behind it, and then the boosting of tourism. But the general idea here is discovering the ancient world that is all around us and realizing how little we know and how very, very little time society. See, that looks like an arm extended, like almost locked in. And looking at some of these long enough, there appears to be demonic entities that are at war with other forms of life, or some sort of battle that I'm perceiving in some of these images. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. Genetic engineering, we've looked at other potential clues there. So to some people, it's just a rock. To some people, that's just a rock. From another angle, right, there's a form of life there that either was there or is there. Could the idea of some elements being trapped in elements of nature be described as a hell realm? Also, Never-Ending Story comes to mind, as well as the Rockman creature. And so ancient Colorado, the ancient world, ancient Egypt, the idea is the real path of humans and the first humans and the spread of some of these ideas. And it's interesting, with YouTube and the free flow of ideas, there's lots of documentaries now about how various places on the planet, through whatever means, whether they were aliens or whatnot, knowledge that was passed on to indigenous people. As far as the early indigenous people, by the way, that did travel through this region, and what is documented and what is believed is that the Clovis Indians passed through here. But what's debatable is what these things are that have been captured, that are in the rock. Just rock, some people say. Just rock. So I don't know that necessarily all of these things are on record who have been created by the Clovis Indians. What I suspect is a lot of this rock is perceived to be just rock, with it being just a mere coincidence that there is such a lifelike nature. And then what changed for me after looking at these images differently, because my experience was um, Bill showing them to me with his excitement and really not having the same zeal, but getting it right away, that there's something to this, and then having my own experience by looking at these images. And we'll go back one more time. These images are another location closer to Mesa Verde within a few hours. And what we can see here is various images when I close up or do a zoom up from the larger HD video or image, things that look serpent-like or hybrid-like way, way big time predating the Native Americans. Maybe the Native Americans stumbling upon this site and there's being something to the underground. What lies below this rock structure, where these formations are just seen as accidental. But for the record, right, this is not something in these specific images that I'm aware that other people have discussed. This is just something that I zoomed in through a simple program, and I can see what appears to be formations, sculptures, something like a headdress around a larger rock formation near the four corners. And I'm asking myself, is this potentially a clue of the ancient world here in Colorado, and links to things that appear Incan, but again, and now we're going to go to the articles again for some more information. So it appears, we'll get some more information, that they discovered near the island of the sun new archaeological discoveries, pre-Incan. And I've even heard on Coast to Coast, there are other theories about Lake Titicaca, why it's even at that elevation. And the idea of early Earth changes, maybe previous pole shifts, other major changes that led to its potential changes in position. But what I do pay attention to, I pay attention to the synchronicities. When I notice, for example, that I'm looking at something and that it may interconnect with something else that I was just looking at. Tiwanaku, okay, this rings something to me when I say Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku sounds very natural. I believe that I've lived before as a Native American, and I just haven't really jotted down these number of different possibilities. Maybe I could be returning to, Colorado and other places in the American Southwest because of a previous history. But Tiwanaku was the name of this group that was in that area. It has already been established that between 500 and 1100 CE, that Lake Titicaca was the province of the Tiwanaku, one of the two great civilizations that occupied the Andes before the rise of the Incas in the 15th century. The other was the Wari Society. Okay, some of the things discovered: ritual connotations, including ceramic, feline incense burners, and shell or stone ornaments. They also found the remains of juvenile llamas thought to be sacrificial offerings. People also associate the island of the sun with the Incas because it was an important pilgrimage location for them and because they left behind numerous ceremonial buildings and offerings on and around the island. Our research shows that the Tiwanaku people who developed in Lake Titicaca between 500 and 1100 CE were the first people to offer items of value to religious deities in the area. The feline incense burners depicted pumas, known to be an animal with strong religious connotations for the Tiwanaku. So when I'm thinking that there may be a connection with this, the type of people like the Tiwanaku around that time period, that version of it also here in Colorado. And of course, in the United States of America, these more ancient sites, but maybe even predating that. Something that clearly predates the Hopi, also known as the Anasazi. And the idea they may have stumbled upon certain sites that were previously used by other groups. Going back to this, supernatural deities discovered in Lake Titicaca in the Andes. Gold medallions also, and a turquoise stone pendant. These riches were likely offered to supernatural deities hundreds of years ago by elite people from the Tiwanaku culture who established the first large state in the Andes Mountains from 500 to 1100. But these swanky gods weren't the only lavish aspect of the offering. It appears that the Tiwanaku boated to a small group outcrop near the middle of Lake Titicaca, essentially a tiny island which is now underwater and presents the offerings there. It is easy to see why this tiny island would have been an attractive spot for ritualistic offerings. It would have been the closest piece of land to the center of the vast lake. So something to do with it being a deep lake. Divers' Paradise have for decades known about the treasures at the bottom of Lake Titicaca, the highest large lake in the world, which straddles the boundary between Peru and Bolivia. I'm going to wrap this up. It's widely believed by many that this is the source of life, this area around Peru. And a lot of people go down there for ayahuasca ceremonies to connect with another level of consciousness. Colorado is also known for the Sipapu as well, various different spots, various mountains, perhaps New Mexico as well, where native tribes, indigenous people at one time believe that the first man and woman were created. Now, showing you what I've shown you, especially with that one sexual picture from Bill Gorman, right? Like that's a little too, and it may have been carved there. But see, these are not things that are officially recognized. They're just rock to some people. And I think that there are clues of multiple highly historic ancient world spots where genetic tampering and the first humans were created and then maybe discarded. I think that there may be evidence of this throughout the world. Earlier today, I was also reading from a book on Chinese mythology or mythology in general. And these going back to some of these images from Bill Gorman, but it talked about the idea of a Chinese myth of a mega feminine giant, right? That basically created the earth, that the earth is basically created from a mega feminine giant, that the earth is living, but more or less is like and Tiamat comes to mind as well, that maybe we're a part of an ancient world that broke off, exploded like something out of a Superman plot, but there is something to this realm here. And with our computers and with entertainment and things of that nature, we become more and more disconnected from the sun, disconnected from nature, disconnected from mythology. And so, like, literally, there could be something in plain sight, but unless someone has the education to recognize that what they're seeing is depicting something very ancient, that's also been depicted in actual mythologies, that there's a parallel, there's a patterning here. And this is not something that people are taught to see, looking at the world differently. And so the greater question also is, why has the government looked upon Colorado, Denver, other areas with a whole lot of interest, in which clearly there are some of these clings and formations that are in the backdrop. There's the book Into the Valley by Christopher O'Brien. Also, Welcome to the Valley. He has several versions of a book that tells a story of cattle mutilations, alien abductions. There's also patterns that I picked on recently, picked up on. There's a recent article talking about how massive the solar flare was in 1972. Okay, and then it was after 1972, leading up to 1975, that a microcycle of abductions, specifically of women in the United States, were reported. And then, of course, it tapers back, tapers off. And then you have late 70s leading into the 1980s. Again, another solar cycle. And then the activity picks up again. Then I came across an article. There's a video I made on this channel showing that. That video shows the connection that I feel is there between an increase in solar activity and an increase in UFO sightings. That somehow the paranormal is activated when the sun is more active. And so we're heading towards a massive solar event that's going to have larger implications than just on war, human psychology, and the grid. Okay, looking at it from another angle, paranormal, right? And it's almost like we're heading towards where X marks the spot, where it's Ghostbuster season, where we could be heading towards a time where, quote unquote, like they say, the dead will rise again. Well, what kind of dead are we talking about? And as we look at our world at war, as we look at the divisions of the races by design, we look at potential realities of the ancient world where people were made different and set against each other. Then we ask ourselves now, as we live on top of this rock, why do we keep continuing old world dark age behavior unless we're being affected by the ancient world? The unresolved energies that are lingering below our feet and beyond. With that, we're going to bring this video to completion. I'm Alex Ansary signing off, reminding you the path to the ultimate truth and place of power still lies within.